Hey everyone, and welcome to Tony for Fall to Temptation. Tony for you. Every culture has their take on angels, demons, spirits, and ghosts. From across the globe, these spiritual entities cover every topic and domain you could possibly think of. Of all the cultures one can study, however, there is one that stands out as particularly brutal and horrific. The ancient Canaanites of around 200 BC had many stories told of them throughout historical and religious texts. They range greatly in their topic, but what all records of these people tell of is the unmatched horror of their gods and religion. From carnal displays of depravity to child sacrifice, the gods and people of the region were a waking nightmare for all to see. Let's go over just a few of this region's pantheistic gods that struck fear and reverence for all that witnessed their horrible rituals. Without any further ado, let's talk about the horrific gods of Canaan. This video was made possible by the great people over at my Patreon. If you'd like to support, check the link in the description below. Also, I have a Discord, so if you want to come chat with me and other wannabe theologists, come join and hang out. The most recognizable and possibly the most terrifying god of the region is Moloch. Moloch, whose name means ruler, is the bull-headed Canaanite god of human sacrifice, and more specifically, child sacrifice. Of all the Canaanite gods spoken of in the Bible and old contemporary literature, Moloch is perhaps the most brutal, bloody, and horrific. Sometimes he is described as a fallen angel, while other times he is simply a false god whose influence has irreparably poisoned the local population. His earliest depictions can be traced back to the book of Leviticus in the Bible, with other mentions within Kings and Jeremiah, here portrayed as a false god worshipped by the blasphemous Canaanites. Within the book, it tells of the Israelites venturing from their lands and visiting the other civilizations of the region. When they reached Canaan, they were met with a horror they could hardly describe. There existed a massive statue in the center of the city. The visage was that of half man and half jackal. His chest holds within a blazing fire where the people gathered. First, the people gave sacrifices of grain and animals, but the god's hunger was not sated. Soon, the people brought out their children to feed the idol. Plunged into the massive kiln, the children's screams quickly abated as the smoke passed through the great sculpture's nostrils. The sacrifice was met with immense fanfare, with music, chanting, and the prayers of even the parents resounding out in a great cacophony of terror. There are plenty of passages in the Old Testament that confuse many people. Commandments like not marking your skin and not marrying one who is outside of your religion, alongside more extreme ones like not sacrificing your children. Well, the deeper you dive into the history of Israel at the time, it becomes obvious that almost every neighbor God's chosen people had were home to some of the most horrific practices known to mankind. In fact, the term Holocaust originated from the Israelites' witnessing of human sacrifice all those years ago. Historically, the term meant a sacrifice in which the offering was burned completely on an altar. Many of the odd rules Israelites had to follow weren't exactly because those practices were inherently evil, but simply that they were commonplace in the lands of great evil. Is having a tattoo evil? Well, no, but the people of Canaan really like tattoos, so better just to steer clear of anything that they do. It also makes sense why they wouldn't exactly want their people getting married to a group that was completely comfortable with burning their own children alive. Perhaps the most extreme example of disavowal in the Bible comes from Leviticus, using the word Moloch and human sacrifice interchangeably. Moreover, thou shalt say to the children of Israel, whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth of his seed unto Moloch, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I also will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he hath given of his seed unto Moloch, to defile my sanctuary, and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do at all hide their eyes from that man, when he giveth of his seed unto Moloch, and put him not to death, then I will set my face against that man, and against his family, and I will cut him off, and all that go astray after him, to go astray after Moloch, from among their people. Pretty cut and dry. If anyone even thinks of sacrificing a child, they will be punished in this life and the next. Despite how definite God's words are in shunning Moloch, he plays a large part in the fall of King Solomon, the wisest king in history. Solomon was the famous son of King David, the one who slew Goliath, and built the first temple period with wisdom bestowed upon him by God himself. After many years of rule, Solomon began showing signs of a coming downfall. He was enticed by the women of neighboring lands and introduced polytheistic worship into his kingdom. God explicitly warned Solomon not to mingle with the women of these blasphemous lands, but the king would not listen. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. After his death, the subsequent downfall of Solomon's kingdom was devastating, as no other king was recognized by the people, and never again would the people of Israel see prosperity as they once did. Outside of biblical text, perhaps no other work does the fearsome Moloch better than John Milton's Paradise Lost, in which it states, "First, Moloch, horrid king besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears. Though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud their children cries unheard, that passed through fire to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worship in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Argob and in Basin, to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, the wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God." Sometimes I think we should count our blessing that human sacrifice was so shunned in the past. Things could have really turned out worse for us. Next is Asherah, the resident goddess of fertility. Asherah, whose name means she who enriches, is quite possibly the most important goddess of all time, since she may or may not have been the wife of Yahweh himself. Yes, that does sound crazy, since, as previously mentioned, God took polytheism as a serious affront against him, and the first of the 10 Commandments states, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." But first, let's go over the goddess herself before exploring her alleged pairing with the Lord. Thanks to stone tablets written in the ancient Semitic language Ugaritic, the theology of the region can be explored. Within these texts, Asherah is believed to bear the names Athirat, Alat, and Ashirat, so I'll be exploring them with that in mind. Asherah is considered to be the consort of El, the Semitic creator god. Many believe the god Baal to be the main god of the Canaanite pantheon, but before his popularity rose, there was the father and mother of the gods, El and Asherah. The matriarchal goddess Asherah was closely tied to the sea and holy places, as well as encompassing all traits maternal. Her name even sometimes used interchangeably with the term a holy place. She was described as the nurse of the gods and their intermediary to sort out disputes and seek compromise. She really was like a mother to them, sorting out their petty arguments. Unfortunately, the goddess waned in popularity over the many years, along with her husband El, often being conflated with Anat and Astarte, who were other female gods of the time, but the Bible distinguishes all these figures as being distinctly different entities. Asherah was commonly depicted as a simple wooden pole, often accompanied by ibexes or other grazing animals, but also sometimes depicted as simply an inverted triangle, with many scholars believing that the shape was a stand-in for the female genitalia. She was the fertility goddess after all. With that out of the way, I know what you're thinking. This Asherah lady doesn't sound so bad. How exactly is she a horrific goddess? Well, as it turns out, the culture that was totally okay with throwing children into pits of fire didn't exactly have the most holy way of worshipping the mother goddess. Somewhat obviously, Asherah had her fair share of ritualistic sacrifice as well, and many historians and theologians also believe that the women tasked with being priestesses of Asherah had very sensual duties. It was believed that acts to appease the goddess involved illicit sex and ritual prostitution. It can also be assumed that many women of the time were born and raised to be temple prostitutes. These acts of depravity oftentimes being done under what was known as an Asherah pole. These sacred trees were meant to depict the goddess and were so ubiquitous at the time that they were sometimes simply called Asherahs themselves. Now, finally, to get back to the goddess's pairing with Yahweh, the God of the Israelites. Archaeological digs within the ancient city of Arad, located in the Kingdom of Judah dating back to the 9th century to 6th century BCE, found some odd things. Within an ancient temple, they found there were 2 standing stones, one large and one small, with 2 incense burners alongside them. These standing stones often conveyed the presence of a deity within the temple, but the people at the time ought to have only worshipped one, so why were there 2? Turns out there are even more odd archaeological finds throughout the region that may convey a possible consort to Yahweh. In the Sinai region, there existed a jar with a Hebrew blessing written on it, stating Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. Another inscription was found on a tablet within the region stating, Blessed by Uriah, by Yahweh, for from his enemies, by Yahweh's Asherah, he has saved him. These finds confused many religious scholars, not only with the knowledge that blessings were written as if to say Yahweh had a consort with which he commanded the Israelites, but also the odd manner in which it was written. So, does this confirm that God originally had a wife that was revised out of history? Well, no, not really. Most likely, since the ancient Israelite religion had many similarities to the ancient Canaanite religion, some Israelites may have confused Asherah as the consort of their god rather than El of the Canaanites. El, whose name means simply God or Lord, is also a name used for the Israelite God in the Old Testament, along with Elohim, Ehyeh, Asher-Ehyeh, and many more. This would lead many to believe the god El was also commonly mistaken for the Israelite god Yahweh, therefore making the pairing between him and Asherah very natural, as that was literally the belief of the Canaanites at the time. Another interpretation is that the grammar is intentionally odd. Yahweh and his Asherah isn't exactly how you would write about the wife of your god, but rather an inanimate object. As we said before, sometimes the word Asherah was used to describe simply an object, in this case a wooden pole meant to invoke the goddess, and was also used as a synonym for a holy place, though even these explanations leave many people confused. The most simple explanation is that the people of Israel at the time did in fact embrace the polytheistic nature of other religions into their kingdom, backed up with the biblical text with the fall of King Solomon being attributed to such practices. Asherah was surely one of the most popular of these goddesses, as she was second to El in Canaan. Her rituals of sex must have been quite popular, and feminine figures were found all over the dwellings of Israel at the time. The Bible, on many occasions, states the Israelites falling to idol worship plenty of times, and the archaeological finds back this up perfectly. It's impossible to know whether Asherah was the wife of Yahweh, just another fertility goddess, or even the horrible deity of prostitution and adultery. Regardless, this is a deity with a lot more to her than Moloch, but maybe that just makes her all the more insidious. Well, that covers just a few of the blasphemous Canaanite gods. Let me know what you think of the two in the comments down below, and while you're down there, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. The territory comes with a lot of speculation and relying on religious scholars, but it's simply fascinating to learn more about old Israel's not-so-friendly neighbors. This doesn't even begin to cover the entirety of the ancient world's Semitic deities, but I'm glad I got to cover just a few of the most interesting ones. Special thanks to Andre Vinicius de Silva Valens, Anton, Kalos, Frankie Stoned, Goose Kebab, Jim Taylor, Just a Middleman, Matt M, Patty123, Stuart Ash, The Digital Dutchman, The Toaster Messiah, Video Gamer 75, and many more for supporting the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to support, check the link in the description below. Thanks for watching this terrifying old god roundup, and I'll see you in the next Tony for You. Have a good one.